Yes, it's a couple of minutes after 3 o'clock Central European time, and it's time to start this webinar that we are broadcasting from our webinar studio in Stockholm. And the title of this webinar is Get Inspired by Motion Intelligence Use Cases. So this is what we're going to focus around for approximately 30 minutes from now. And it will be possible to ask questions. There is a functionality for that in GoToWebinar that you can find in the GoToWebinar control panel that you have. So you can ask questions there, and we will answer your questions in the end, but you can actually send in the questions during the actual webinar. So let's move on. And with us today, we have two speakers, Anders Hardebring and Daniel Berglind. And I think I'll hand over the webinar to Anders.
Thank you, Lars. So I'm Anders Hardebring. I'm CEO and co-founder at Imagimob. And my background is that I've been in the mobile industry for 25 years and been through a number of startups. I think this is very much one of the most interesting ones.
Yeah, and my name is Daniel Berglind, and I'm a researcher at Karolinska Institutet in Stockholm, Sweden. And I have a biomedical background, and I defended my thesis in 2014, and now I'm doing postdoctoral research, and I have my own research group at Karolinska Institutet.
Yeah. So we'll come back to Daniel later. The agenda for today is, first we're going to have a very short introduction of our technology, and then we will focus on different use cases. And most of the focus will be on the use case that Daniel will describe from Karolinska. Then we have questions and then a wrap-up. A little bit about the company. We have been around for 3.5 years and we're based out of Stockholm, Sweden. And we are experts in sensor technology and artificial intelligence and have developed a suite of products around that. And last week we were actually awarded of the Startup of the Year, 2017 it should be, award, not 14. And we also have the technology is in use. We have around 15 customers using the tech. And so the name of the product is SensorBeat. So what is it about? It's about that we can do motion intelligence or motion detection on a small device. That can be a PCB or something. We can do this with high accuracy. We can do this in real time. We can do this on low-cost hardware, which is important when you want to do this in millions of devices. We can also do it with low data traffic costs, which is also very important in many applications, and also low power consumption. That is actually critical in basically any IoT application. This technology can be used for many different applications and use cases. For instance, in industry and manufacturing, where we have a number of projects and customers. There are a number of use cases in automotive. I'm not going to talk about them today. Also in smart buildings. There are a lot of interesting use cases. And the fourth segment is lifestyle, where the Karolinska project is about. So the first use case is about in manufacturing and predictive maintenance. So here we can use taking sensor input from machines or equipment. It could be about motion, acceleration, from accelerometers. It could be about power or temperature. So by adding these sensor information together and use artificial intelligence, we could, for instance, detect when a machine is not working so well anymore and where it needs maintenance. So here we have a number of interesting projects. The second one is a use case or project that we have with ABB, and this is a product with a robot called Yumi, and it's basically putting plastic pieces together, like in a production line. And but when it fails, it cannot actually recognize that the mounting was not correct. But with our technology, we can see that it didn't really work as it should, and we can detect that fault to make sure that only correct things move on in the production line. A big area is about human body motion and fitness trackers. So there are lots of fitness trackers in the market, like Fitbit and Jawbone and all these. But what they actually have is step counters. They don't really use artificial intelligence to understand what they're actually doing. They're basically counting steps. And here we could add a lot of value to these products so that we can see a difference between a walk or a run or walking uphill or walking downhill. And in an office environment, we can see the difference between sitting at the desk, standing up, walking, stuff like that. And that's actually very important in the office. The next group of use cases is for power tools, where we've had projects of connecting power tools and understanding how they move. For instance, it can be used for power tools to increase safety, so that we can detect dangerous events or dangerous positions or dangerous movements by the chainsaw. And by having the intelligence on the device, we can have a quick information loop from the sensor data to the decision and the action to actually turn off the tool. And the final one of these use cases are for pet trackers, and there are loads of pet trackers in the market. Most of them have like a GPS technology where you can see where your dog is, if it's at home or in the garden or if it's run away. But we can add a dimension to this, which is also understanding what the dog is actually doing. So you can see that the dog is at home sleeping or at home eating. And this can be used for making sure that the pet is healthy and well. Actually, quite a few projects in that space. And the next case is about the project with Karolinska Institutet, where we assess physical activity. And now I would like to introduce Daniel. So Daniel, welcome here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what is your background?
Yeah. So my background is that I studied biomedicine at Karolinska Institute for almost 6 years. And then I did a PhD at the Karolinska Institute, where I studied the effects of obesity surgery in women and how it affects the woman who undergoes bariatric surgery or obesity surgery, and how it affects her life and how it affects her family. And I was interested in how it affects how much she is moving and how much her children are moving, that the physical activity levels, basically. So I wrote my thesis in 2014 about that. And then after that, I have done more research on physical activity, and I am more and more interested in research on the levels of physical activity in children. So I have my own research group now, where I have 2 doctoral students who are looking into this. And so basically, we have one of the world's largest data set of objectively measured physical activity in children. So to understand this, we could say that in the history, when we wanted to know how much people are moving in society, we've used questionnaires. So we send them out to people and we ask them, how much do you move? And that's not a really good picture of reality. When we now have objective measures, we know that it differs a lot how much you think you move and how much you actually move. So today, when we do these type of large population surveys of how people and children move in society, we use objective measures mostly. And by that, I mean that we use mostly accelerometers. That in this case, the children have had around their waist or around the wrist. And we know today that levels of physical activity, it's very important to have high, or at least as high as the recommendations are for physical activity to have a healthy life, basically. We know that, and we know that it's important to have those levels even when you're a child. But basically, what we do today with the accelerometers is that we put them on children and adults, and they'll have them for 1 week, and it gathers a lot of data. And we use that data only to extract levels of physical activity, that is, how much intensity they are doing, the children or the adults. So that's what we can see today. And we know that the more intense physical activity you are engaging in, the better your health is, basically.
Okay.
So that's what we know today.
But then that means that you cannot really see the difference between different activities.
No, that's what I really would like to see. So today, when we get back the accelerometers from the participants in our studies, we can see how much they have moved and at what intensity.
In terms of meters or
yeah,
time,
for example, in time, we can see what intensity at what time.
Okay.
But we don't know what type of behaviors they have done. We're not really sure if they've been sitting or standing. We only know that they've been sedentary, not moving that much.
Okay.
But we don't know. And more research is pointing to that it might be bad for your health sitting, but standing maybe not that bad. And that's really difficult with today's technique, the technique that's available today to measure that. So that's a problem for us researchers.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's actually the next question. You're using existing technology today, and what are the limitations then?
Well, basically, the limitations is that we have a lot of data. For example, an accelerometer that we use, it detects at a sensitivity of 100 hertz. So, and we have them on the participants for 1 week usually. So that means that I will have a lot of data to analyze, and the only thing
how much data is that? You know,
for example, in an Excel file, it's about 33 billion observations for 1 week. So we have a lot of observations. They are triaxial, these accelerometers, so that's why it's that many.
Yeah,
it's from free access, so to say, and so we have that data, but the only thing that we use today is actually the intensity level. What we would like to have with this detailed data is a tool to be able to assess what types of activity people or children are doing. If we could have that data, then perhaps we could couple that data, associate that data with health outcomes. And perhaps we could show that spending time in front of a screen is particularly bad for a health outcome, say diabetes type 2 or something like that. Or we could detect that perhaps bicycling is extremely good for health, or jumping, or playing in the sandbox, or whatever. So that would be, if that technique would be available, that would mean a lot to us as researchers. And we can use that to track healthy behaviors, and in the future design interventions and ultimately develop new health policies.
Okay, sounds great. So, yeah, we at Imagimob, we have this project with you and Karolinska now. Can you tell me more about what this project is about? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, what I told you is we have those limitations. So what we are trying to do together is find a way to actually detect human movement with these accelerometers. So we have put accelerometers on a lot of, or I have done that previously on over 1,000 4-year-olds in Sweden. So I have a lot of data that could be analyzed. So what we're doing now is that we're labeling data, we could say. So we take in kids in a lab setting where we can control everything. We have a videotape and we tell them to do specific movements. For example, play with your computer, run around, jump, sit down, a lot of different movements. And then we know what movement they are doing at what time. And then we get labeled data, and then we train the Imagimob system to detect and learn that pattern. And once the system has learned this pattern, then we can use it on this very large data set that I have. So I can actually see what 4-year-olds in Sweden have been doing, not just what intensity level they are at, but what type of behaviors they are doing 24/7.
Well, that's something I think is really, really interesting, that once you have trained the system, you can use it on huge data sets. I mean, you can use it on a large population. I think that's super interesting.
That's what almost all research all over the world today on physical activity are using accelerometers. It's pretty cheap today, and it's pretty easy. And the research has shown that we can actually give these devices to people and they can have them for about a week and we get very detailed data. But we have a problem in the research community also, that we don't really have a uniform way to analyze data. We don't really use the same techniques to define intensity and so on. So, and then no one actually, as I've talked about here, knows what people actually are doing. We only know what intensity level they are at. So if someone could crack that nut, then we have a lot of data from all over the world to work with. Not to mention all of the data that are collected outside research. Think for yourself, you have a mobile phone with an accelerometer in. You have these fitness trackers that people are using. It's a huge potential if the system would work and if someone could actually crack the nut and get human movement pattern recognition to work.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So when do you expect to have the first results?
We're collecting
we're
doing data collection now, and the next step is basically to train the system. Once we've trained the system, we're going to try it on my large data set, which contains, as I told you, over 1,000 4-year-olds in Sweden have had an accelerometer for 1 week. So we're going to use it on that data set to see if the system can detect behaviors, basically. And once we've done that and published that, then we'll see. But hopefully other researchers also likes to use this technique so that we can have a uniform way to analyze data.
Okay. But do you think is that a realistic opportunity here, that this or Imagimob tech can be used in the research?
Yeah, I think so.
Academic world.
Yeah, I think so. It's as I thought, a lot of researchers uses this technique, and there's no really perfect way today to analyze it. So we would really, research community is in need of a better way to analyze this data, and the data that is collected all over the world is really detailed, but we're using very small bits of it today, very small bits. And the data contains a lot of more context that could potentially be used if we had the technique. But it's not really, you know, we researchers, we're usually working for ourselves and we're not really out in the real world, as I would like to describe it. So,
but today you're in the real world.
Today I'm in the real world, but I think we have a lot to learn from new technology and companies, and I see no problems in collaborating as long as we're aiming at the same results, basically.
Yeah. I mean, we also think this is super interesting to work with yourself and the academic world. I think that's really, really interesting. So, well, I mean, I think that we know that our tech works well. So I'm really optimistic that this will go well. So, but once you have the results, how are you planning to present this information?
Yeah. So, like, the first step will be kind of a validation study that I talked about, that we have people in a lab setting. We know what they're doing. We're tagging, we're labeling the data, and we can see how accurate is the system to detect, for example, playing computer, jumping, running. I guess some behaviors will be really easy for the system to learn. For example, jumping, running, stuff that's pretty easy to detect. Other behaviors will be more difficult, like if we're trying on adults, for example, washing the dishes, separating that from example vacuum cleaning, that will be more tricky, and also separate screen time on a mobile phone from reading, that will be more tricky, and so on. But basically we will do a validation study, see how good is the system to detect a number of movement patterns in children and adults. That will be the first, and once we have those data, we will publish that, and then after that we'll try the system on a real data set, so to say, with unlabeled data that are collected in these 4-year-old children, and also hopefully publish that data. And then once data is out there, then a lot of other researchers hopefully will be interested and willing to use the technique on their data sets.
Yeah, that would be super.
Yeah, so that's basically, that's the way it works in research. Like once you've published your results, you have to give them to other researchers. And but I see huge potential in this.
But when you say published, that means that in academic papers.
Yes, of course,
research papers.
Yeah, that's basically what what all research is about. We do studies, and then we publish them in peer-reviewed papers, basically. And that's kind of a long process. You know, you do the study, and then it could take years. But if you want to do something in academia, you should do it really well. And that's what we're aiming at, and that's what we're trying to do together.
And publishing also means that it's not that you just send out the paper; it's kind of a quality stamp or something. Someone will have to approve it.
And this review process that many don't really understand, but it could usually takes from half a year up to 2 years, maybe. So it's other very well-known researchers within the area who comments on your paper. So basically, we're not letting any bad data be published, basically. So it's a tough process, but it gives you good results, or results that you can trust on, at least.
And then we also talked about that there are a number of conferences where this can also be presented.
Yes, of course, international, national, not only just research conferences. I think we could think broader than that. Other conferences also using for other companies, for example. And there are a lot of companies that track physical activity, these motion detections, and that's also a lot of these devices today. Like you take the Fitbit, the Jawbone, Apple Watch, and so on. They also say that they can predict sitting from standing, for example. But that's not the way they say they can do it. But I would like to see that data. I don't believe in it at all. It's actually it's too complicated with to do with today's technique. So those companies also have interest in this technique.
Cool. Yeah, it's very interesting, and like I said, we think this is super interesting to have this connection with the academic world.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you would? This is kind of the last slide on your presentation. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, not really. I think we covered the most important things. So basically, what we're trying to do is to wrap it up is to find a technique that we could use to see what type of behaviors people are doing 24/7. That would, for me as a researcher, be really valuable information, because then I can associate certain behaviors with certain health outcomes. As I told you before, maybe I can see that sitting in front of a screen is associated to later developing diabetes, but sitting reading is not. Perhaps, or we could see that some type
But
of.
do you think that's the case, or what?
I don't think that's the case, but that's what media likes. They have this picture now of sitting is the new smoking and so on, and it's a lot of talk in the media about sitting, but we have no good device to measure sitting. So that's a huge problem. We're talking about things that we even can't measure. That's a problem. So that's a huge problem. And then also it's a lot of talk about screen time. And the way we measure screen time today is by questionnaires. And questionnaires is, as I usually say within research, shit in, shit out. If we have bad data in, it will be really bad data out. And asking people how much screen time they are engaging in is not a good way to actually know how much screen time they are engaged in. So I'm not really too fond of that research. I think, and it's more and more shown that that levels of physical activity, if you are active enough, it's not really that that sitting is harmful for you. But if you're not active enough, then perhaps it is. And problem today in today's society is that we're not moving at all, basically. So then sitting can become a problem, but I don't think that the sitting behavior is a problem per se. But before I can say that, I would like to have a technique to actually measure it. So that's what we're working on, for example.
So thank you. Great, Daniel. So now it's about to wrap up this webinar. So what we have talked about is in these different use cases, and specifically with Daniel at Karolinska, is to measure motion or movement using devices. So in the case of Karolinska, they want to measure walking, sitting, standing, bicycling, running, stuff like that. And that is what we do with the product SensorBeat in this project. So for you listeners, if any one of you thinks this is very interesting and are thinking of how can this be applied to your business or to your problems, please feel free to contact us, and we have different arrangements for interested customers. We can meet and we can have workshops, stuff like that. So send me an email or give me a call. And with that, maybe now Lars is coming also.
Yeah,
Hello,
I think it's time to wrap up. It's so interesting, Donny, to hear that Karolinska Institute is so far ahead using this sort of really new technologies for this interesting research. I think there's a lot of people that are looking forward to see the result of that. But let's see if we have any questions coming in that we can answer. So please feel free to type in your questions into the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a little question mark icon there that you can use for that. And we don't have any questions so far.
I think everything was clear.
Everything was clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so think about some questions. And while you do that, I would like to say thanks to Anders and thanks to Daniel.
Thank you.
And we'll be back. There's so many more use cases that will pop up that will be interesting to listen to, I think, going forward. So yeah, here comes the question. So let me see. The question is assisting GPS in narrow moves. I don't think I really understand the question, but
So let me see.
assisting
It
GPS
could be,
in narrow moves.
GPS. I guess perhaps what the question is about is GPS doesn't really work indoors. Could it be that if this could help the GPS to actually track behaviors even if you're indoors?
Yeah, I don't exactly.
Yeah, well, in general, GPS measures sort of bigger movements.
Yeah.
In this case, we're talking about very small movements.
We have had projects where we have used this technology in order to assist GPS, for instance, in if you move in a certain direction, stuff like that. But that's really really not the focus for what we're doing right now.
No, so maybe in combination with GPS, use this technology in combination with GPS.
I think one way to describe it, I think is very interesting, is to see that motion intelligence is the next level of resolution for GPS. With GPS, you know where someone is, and with the motion technology, you can see where they are and what they do.
Yeah.
So where is the person? The person is in the street and bicycling, or the dog is in the garden eating or something. So I think there are actually loads of use cases where GPS and motion makes very good sense. Yeah, that's very good use cases there.
Yeah, I hope we managed to answer.
Hopefully this.
But that's also something that could be used. There are researchers who are putting GPS and accelerometers on people.
Mm-hmm.
So we know from that type of research, we have seen, for example, that certain environmental features, such as if you have a proximity to parks, if you have a lot of playful things in the parks, children seem to be more active, for example. And then if we could have a technique also to see that they actually are active and what they're doing together with the GPS and accelerometer, then that would be awesome.
Interesting. Yeah. All right, see if we have any more questions. Well, we don't have any more questions coming in right now. So, it's 35 minutes since we started. So I think we'll stop today's webinar there. And I hope you will have a great afternoon if you're on Central European time. So take care, everybody, and we will stop our webinar there.